Ordinary folks with no financial education can be wealthy if they have a handful of behavioral skills that have nothing to do with formal measures of intelligence. Ronald Read was one of those people. He lived in Vermont. He spent most of his working life at a gas station, then took a job as a janitor at a department store. He wore old clothes and drove a used car. If you saw him around town, you would not assume he was rich. Some people even thought he might be struggling. Then Ronald died in 2014 at the age of 92, and everyone learned how badly they had misjudged him. His estate was worth nearly $8 million. So how did a man with an ordinary job and an ordinary income build that kind of wealth? Let's answer that first. He consistently spent less than he earned and used the difference to buy stocks. He held many of those investments for years. When the companies paid dividends, he allowed that money to keep growing inside his portfolio. His paycheck supplied the starting capital. Businesses, dividends, and several decades did most of the work after that. But this answer is incomplete. Millions of people work hard. Plenty of them live carefully. Very few die with $8 million. To understand Ronald's story, we need to separate the behaviors we can copy from the result no one can promise. Ronald was born in Vermont in 1921. His family did not have much money, and he became the first person in his family to graduate from high school. He served in the Army during World War II. When the war ended, he returned home and went to work at a local gas station. He stayed in that ordinary job for decades. After leaving the gas station, he did not fully retire. He took a part-time janitorial job at JCPenney. Nothing about that career sounds like a path to $8 million. That is why his story matters. A high income can make wealth easier to build, but income is only part of the equation. What remains after the paycheck arrives matters too. Imagine two people with similar salaries. Both receive a raise in the same year. One person immediately buys a more expensive car, moves into a larger home, and starts taking nicer vacations. The raise feels real, but every extra dollar quickly finds a new place to go. The other person improves life a little but does not spend the entire raise. A portion is invested automatically every month. After 1 year, these two people may look almost identical. 30 years later, their financial lives could be completely different. Ronald was closer to the second person. His assets grew, but his cost of living did not rise at the same speed. That gave him money he could leave in the market for a very long time. Still, saving alone cannot explain $8 million. The crucial step was turning those savings into assets. Ronald regularly read the Wall Street Journal. He studied businesses and gradually built a sizable stock portfolio. Reports about his estate describe holdings across several industries, including companies that paid dividends. That detail matters. Money sitting in a drawer does not grow on its own. A share of stock represents ownership in a real business. When that business earns a profit, it can invest in future growth, distribute some of the money to shareholders, or do both. Ronald did not appear to treat every dividend payment as spending money. He kept money invested. Additional shares could produce additional dividends, and over enough time, the growth began to build on itself. To see what time can do, consider a simple hypothetical example. Suppose someone invests $450 every month for 60 years. If that money earns an average annual return of 8%, it would grow to roughly $8 million. That was not Ronald's documented monthly contribution. We do not have a complete record of every deposit he made. An 8% return is not guaranteed either. This example only shows how dramatically a long time horizon can change the outcome. In this calculation, the investor contributes $324,000 directly. Most of the final balance comes from investment growth, followed by more growth on the earlier gains. Now shorten the timeline from 60 years to 30 while leaving everything else the same. The result falls to about $670,000. The monthly contribution did not change, the assumed return did not change. Removing those 30 years erased most of the ending value. That was one of Ronald's greatest advantages. His money remained invested for decades, and he did not seem interested in constantly changing course for the latest excitement. At this point, his story can produce a dangerously simple conclusion. Live cheaply, pick a few stocks, wait long enough, and anyone can become a multimillionaire. It is not that easy. Ronald owned individual stocks. His portfolio contained many companies, so his future did not depend entirely on a single bet. But diversification cannot remove every risk. Companies fail. Dividends get cut. Industries that once looked permanent can slowly disappear. If Ronald had placed all his savings in one or two businesses that collapsed, we might never have heard his name. That is the part these stories often hide. We know Ronald because he succeeded. Other people from the same period may have lived carefully and bought stocks without ending up wealthy. Their names did not appear in the news, and no one made videos about them. That is survivorship bias. Holding investments for a long time is not automatically safe. The thing you own still needs to survive. Refusing to sell a dying company is not patience. There is another question worth asking. How much of life today should someone sacrifice for a larger number in the future? Ronald's modest lifestyle seems to have suited him. That does not mean everyone should wear worn-out clothes, reject every vacation, or reduce life to nothing but investing. Money should provide security and choice. It also needs to support a life worth living today. The useful lesson is not to copy every purchase Ronald did or did not make. It is to keep desire from expanding every time income rises. So what can an ordinary person do with this story now? Suppose you can set aside $300 next month. Do not begin by hunting for a stock that might double. First, make sure a car repair or medical bill will not force you onto a credit card or make you sell investments during a market decline. Once you have some emergency savings, make investing routine. Money that moves automatically after payday does not require a new burst of motivation every month. Then think seriously about diversification. Most people do not have the time to study dozens of companies for decades. Instead of assuming you can identify the next great winner, spreading risk across many businesses may be more realistic. Broad, low-cost investment funds are one common way to do that. After that, try not to interrupt the process. Compounding looks unimpressive at the beginning. The balance moves slowly. After a few months, it can feel as if nothing meaningful is happening. Many people stop during this stage. Ronald did not. He lived to 92 and gave his investments an unusually long time to work. That advantage is hard to copy, but it cannot be removed from the story. When Ronald died, the size of his estate was not the only surprise. People were also surprised by where the money went. He left about $4.8 million to Brattleboro Memorial Hospital and more than $1.2 million to Brooks Memorial Library. The rest went to family members and other people in his life. The library had helped him learn. The hospital had been part of his daily routine and later cared for him. He quietly built his fortune in one small community. In the end, much of that fortune returned to the same community. Now we can give a fuller answer to the question we started with. A janitor did leave behind nearly $8 million, but an ordinary salary did not produce that result by itself. He repeatedly converted part of his paycheck into ownership. He kept his lifestyle from consuming all his progress and then gave those assets decades to grow. We can learn from his patience, his ability to maintain a surplus, and his willingness to think long-term. We cannot demand the same market returns or assume we will have the same number of years. We do not need $8 million for his story to matter. The next time your paycheck arrives, take a look at it. How much will disappear almost immediately, and how much will still belong to your future?